The Trump administration is now carrying out one of the largest refund operations in U.S. trade history after the Supreme Court struck down a major portion of President Donald Trump's global tariff policy. According to newly released court filings, the administration has already refunded nearly $100 billion to American importers. That represents roughly 60% of the estimated $166 billion collected under tariffs that were later ruled unlawful by the nation's highest court. But even as billions of dollars are flowing back to businesses, the legal battle over Trump's trade agenda is far from over. A new lawsuit, filed by 25 U.S. states, is now challenging another round of tariffs introduced by the White House, setting the stage for yet another courtroom showdown that could reshape American trade policy. To understand why these refunds are happening, it's important to look back at the original tariffs. During his presidency, Donald Trump relied heavily on tariffs as one of his signature economic tools. The administration argued that increasing duties on imported goods would encourage companies to manufacture products inside the United States, reduce dependence on foreign suppliers, and strengthen American industry. Earlier this year, however, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that one category of those tariffs had been imposed illegally. The court found that the administration had exceeded its authority by using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, commonly known as IEEPA, to justify sweeping import duties. The IEEPA is a law designed to give presidents emergency powers during extraordinary national emergencies, particularly those involving foreign threats. However, the Supreme Court concluded that the law did not authorize the broad, across-the-board tariffs imposed under Trump's trade policy. That ruling effectively invalidated billions of dollars in duties that had already been collected from American businesses importing goods into the country. The consequences were enormous. According to customs filings submitted to the U.S. Court of International Trade and reported by the Financial Times, the government has already refunded nearly $100 billion. Officials say that more than $128 billion worth of refund claims have already been accepted for processing, meaning the total amount returned to businesses is expected to continue rising. Court documents show that over 330,000 American importers paid tariffs on more than 53 million individual shipments while the disputed duties were in effect. Those companies range from small importers and family-owned businesses to major retailers, manufacturers, and industrial suppliers that rely on imported components for production. The government has agreed to repay eligible businesses, along with interest, although legal experts say the full $106 billion may never be refunded because of ongoing disputes over specific entries and technical customs claims. Perhaps the biggest surprise has been the speed of the repayments. When the Supreme Court delivered its decision, many expected the refund process to stretch on for years. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent himself warned that processing such a massive number of claims could take weeks, months, or even years, because every shipment would need to be reviewed individually. Instead, U.S. Customs and Border Protection has processed a significant portion of the claims much faster than expected, prompting surprise among trade lawyers and customs specialists. But while one legal battle is winding down, another is just beginning. Following the Supreme Court's decision, the Trump administration introduced an entirely new tariff framework. This time, the White House argues the duties are not based on emergency economic powers. Instead, officials say the tariffs target countries that fail to prevent forced labor within their supply chains. The administration argues that products made through forced labor create unfair competition for American manufacturers while also raising serious human rights concerns. According to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the new tariffs are intended to pressure foreign governments into strengthening enforcement against forced labor and improving labor standards. However, critics argue that the new policy is simply a different legal pathway to achieve the same economic outcome. A coalition of 25 states, led by New York Attorney General Letitia James, has now filed a lawsuit claiming the administration is attempting to reimpose tariffs that the Supreme Court has already declared unlawful. According to the lawsuit, changing the legal justification does not change the practical effect. The states argue that American consumers and businesses will once again face higher costs through import taxes that they believe exceed presidential authority. Letitia James accused the administration of trying to illegally raise costs for families and businesses after losing before the Supreme Court. The Trump administration rejects that accusation. Federal officials insist the new duties are legally distinct because they specifically address forced labor concerns rather than relying on emergency economic powers. customs officials have acknowledged the lawsuit and confirmed they will defend the new tariff regime before the U.S. Court of International Trade. The outcome of that case could have consequences extending well beyond Trump's current trade policy. Legal experts say the dispute could redefine the limits of presidential authority over international trade. It may also determine how future administrations, Republican or Democrat, can use executive powers to impose tariffs without explicit approval from Congress. The economic stakes are equally significant. Tariffs are paid by importers when goods enter the United States. Although the taxes are collected at the border, many businesses ultimately pass those additional costs onto consumers through higher prices. Supporters of tariffs argue they protect domestic industries, encourage American manufacturing, and reduce dependence on foreign imports. Critics counter that tariffs increase costs for businesses, disrupt supply chains, and contribute to inflation by making imported products more expensive. This latest legal battle therefore goes beyond the refund of billions of dollars. It is also about defining the balance between presidential power, congressional authority, judicial oversight, and the future direction of U.S. trade policy. For now, nearly $100 billion has already been returned to American importers. Billions more could still be refunded in the months ahead. At the same time, another courtroom fight is underway over the Trump administration's replacement tariff system. The final ruling could determine not only whether the new duties survive legal scrutiny, but also how much authority future presidents will have to reshape America's trade policy through executive action. For businesses, global trading partners, and financial markets alike, the next chapter in America's tariff battle is only just beginning.
They started with just an idea. The world calls it a startup. They call it a labor of love. Some burned out, some broke through, but every single one had a story worth hearing. This is where founders speak without filters, where investors reveal what they actually look for, where failure is just another chapter. Because no matter where the journey takes you, you're always asking the same question: what next?
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to Mirror Now.